Yeah, Andy. Okay, so let's just set parameters like we did last time or other times. Again, please just interrupt after each kind of slide. We'll ask if there's any questions, and if you have them, either raise your hand and Larry, not Larry, sorry, Andy or Lee, whoever's monitoring it, because I cannot see that. I'm just looking at the presentation material. So then you can just pass over them to ask the question or read it out if it's on the chat, Andy, if that's okay.
Not a problem.
Okay, great. So we have seen this before, but we'll go into a little more. Don't now my things. We'll go into more depth in some ways, especially if you ask questions on specific things. So there's a bit in the Law of One on what spiritual progression is in the eternal octave. And when we say that, we're talking about the seven densities of this creation, which is how Ra frames it as an octave. Remember, in comparison, kind of like in musical octave, or if you want to think of it visually, like the seven colors in a prism or in the rainbow spectrum of light. And so what he's going to go into here then is the different aspects of what the higher self is, and how we as mortals in third density can and maybe should access and work with our higher self. But first we need to understand what is that. So Don asks, then the higher self operates from the future as we understand things. In other words, my higher self would operate from what I consider to be my future. Is this correct? Says, from the standpoint of your space time, this is correct. It's interesting the way he phrases that, but that's the right way to phrase it, because from where he's coming from his space time, he probably wouldn't agree that it's future, because they believe in a simultaneity of a lot of things. It's really hard for us to comprehend because we are so we're so bound by our illusion. The illusion of the separate self is bound by space and time. And so we see three-dimensional space and basically one two-dimensional time, think past, present, future. And we see it as a timeline. That's part of the limitations of the finite mind. Okay, and so they're going to speak to us understanding our limitations, but they like to couch their words when there's the sort of there's deeper ways to understand it, but from our perspective, that's the best way to look at it. So basically, he's agreeing, as we understand it, it'll be our future self. So Don then asks, in the case of my higher self, would, shall we say, have a very large advantage in knowing precisely what was needed, since it would know what, as far as I'm concerned, what was going to happen. Is that correct? And Ra says, no, it's not. In that this would be an aberration, abrogation, sorry, of free will. So it would abridge free will or be interfering with free will, which is their first primal distortion, or their kind of the first law, really, under the law of one, is to honor free will. The higher self aspect is aware of the lessons learned through the sixth density. So the higher self understands all the lessons that need to be learned through sixth density. If you'd like to liken it, and sometimes it's easier to an educational curriculum from when you start in kindergarten and go all the way up to postdoctoral work. And you could look at each of the kind of the grade levels kind of as the seven notches in the octave, right? In grade school, junior high, high school, undergrad, grad, etc. So look at that. And so what he's saying there is the higher self knows all of the things that need to be learned to graduate at the level that they're at, or to get to where they're at. Okay. Where the lessons learned through sixth density, the progress rate is fairly well understood. So this has happened, and it's the normal process that happens in the whole of creation. This is what everything is doing. So it's not just our octave. We're all involved in this progressive growth experience. The choices which must be made to achieve the higher self as it is are in the providence of the mind body spirit complex itself, meaning that you have the choices. So then he goes, so there's an oxymoron there, because they know what classes you're taking or need to take, but you still have choice. So you could liken it to, if you're going to university, you have to take certain prerequisite classes to graduate, but which teacher you take, which book they use, how well you study, who you sit by, how much effort you put into it is all up to you. You've got to take the class, but how you take the class and what you gain from taking the class is up to the choices you make within that experience. It's another way of kind of comparing it. So it goes on. Thus, the higher self is like the map in which the destination is known. The roads are very well known. These roads being designed by intelligent infinity, the divine mind, in other words, working through intelligent energy. Intelligent energy is their word for the first two main distortions of love and light. All things in this creation are from love and light, emanate from intelligent infinity as a form of energy that's intelligent. So it's basically a combination of love light. However, he goes, the highest self aspect can program only for the lessons and certain predispositioning limitations if it wishes. So that's its role, to program for the specific lessons and certain predisposition limitations, etc. So that might be things like we're talking about on Thursday, where you get to a certain point, you can work with your higher self to say, I want to program something that would wake me up or intervene if I respond to it correctly. The remainder is completely the free choice of the entity, of each entity. There is the perfect balance between the known and the unknown. He goes on, Don says, does this higher self have a physical vehicle, in other words, a body, or some type of vehicle like our physical vehicle? Does it have a body complex? Yes, Ra said, that's correct. The higher self is of a certain advancement within sixth density going into seventh. After the seventh has been well entered, the mind body spirit complex becomes so totally a mind body spirit complex totality that it begins to gather spiritual mass and approach the octave density. Thus, the looking backwards is finished at that point. So seventh density, they're hinting at it here, is where you stop looking back to be in service to others that are in the lower densities and looking to combine with the one intelligent or infinite creator. So that's the returning to true oneness. So as we talked about, as Rupert Spira says, he indicates that possibly that happens at death. What Ra's pointing out is that you'll go through many lifetimes, all through up to the seventh octave, before your merging back into oneness happens. And they imply even then you don't lose your sense of self. Not completely. There's something that stays uniquely you. All right. You don't just become another. You're a drop of water in the ocean, but you stay knowing that you're that drop of water, that you have these gifts or this experience merged with the totality of the experience of all others. But there's not so much a loss of individual identity. It's very hard for them to explain that. It's very hard for me to explain that, because it's outside of our ability to kind of articulate and comprehend within our limitations. But that's kind of how they explain the journey. He then goes, Don says, is the higher self of every entity of sixth density nature? Ra says, yes, this is an honor duty of self to self as one approaches seventh density. So remember, they're talking about this not so much from they're trying to explain it to people who believe everything is separate and God or the divine is separate from myself and I have to seek it out Whereas their framing is much more like Rupert's one, where and they're really clear on this. All is one. There's only one being having this experience. It's just having many versions of it, an infinite number of versions of it. In every finite mind is a piece of its mind. So that's kind of what they're hinting at here without trying to kind of blow everybody's mind on that. Any quick questions about that slide?
Nothing in the chat as yet, Scott.
Okay, great.
Oh, one
So
come
here's
through
what we're
for Ray.
That's all right. Go ahead and ask. Go ahead. Either you read it, Andy, or they can speak themselves.
It's
Yeah.
a spoken one.
Hi. Am I visible?
Yes.
Okay. One question again, although number of times we have asked, number of times we have discussed about the free will at a physical level and the higher level. As you mentioned, the higher self has already designed the lessons we are supposed to learn. And so as a physical self, with the not yet awakened consciousness, what sort of, when we can say that, yes, our choice is in alignment with the higher self, or isn't it then almost everywhere it comes the surrender state, that every time to which the different religion bow your head or surrender, there's so much on surrender. So basically it is surrender of your physical self to your higher self, and then getting into alignment, and then using your intuitions and other things that, yes, this is in alignment, this feel good, this feel peaceful. So that's, and then choosing your choices or making your choices through free will as a physical self. I
Yeah,
don't know how.
the higher self will not make the choices for you. They refuse to do that, just like Ra would. That would be a violation of their role. And we'll look at it later. The higher self's job is to help program your life lessons specifically between them, but they also look at what's going on during your life lesson because they are you, but they're not going to take over for you. They will guide you if asked. That's the wording that will come up. We'll see it in a minute. Guide you if asked. And so our disposition or opportunity is to, once we're aware of that, learn how to ask and then listen. But the guidance won't be as commandments or direction or decisions on do this, not that. It will be learning to listen to your heart and spirit. It's learning to awaken your own intuition, not allow the chatter in your head to overspeak it. So it's about learning how to tune into it. And that's what we're going to talk about when we look at raising the Kundalini and opening the seven chakra points, is teaching you how to really access that intuition. They won't make the decision for you, though. So you can't say, well, I thought the higher self wanted me to do this. Well, no, you made a choice that was what you wanted to do. That choice then will open up certain things and close down other things because you're now going on path A instead of path B. That's okay. The higher self then will look at, well, where does path A lead you? And they'll look at how that path leads you back to sixth density where they are. And there's ways to do that. Even those who choose the negative path end up back there. They just go on a journey that most of us, once we're aware of it, would choose rather to avoid that journey because it's a dark, much more of a self-centered and much more separate journey. The negative path, if chosen, is actually a bit of a false path, but they allow people to walk it until they figure that out. It's a false path because it's a path of separation in a world or a universe of unity. They separate. It's about separate on the negative path because it's self-centered, not what's best for us. And we're all one. And I don't want to hurt you. Hurt you is hurting me. That kind of concept, which is the very much the both yogic master, Buddhist, and Christian, Judeo-Christian, all of them really have that outlined as treating others with respect and the loving, kind way. So, long story short, Higher self won't make decisions for you. They'll prompt you. If you don't listen to those promptings, they'll stay with you and then prompt you again. But it's about an ongoing process of whether you listen or not. And if you don't, then they'll just keep trying to prompt you to turn back into a way that maybe will be more beneficial. They don't choose for you, though. Does that help?
Yeah, so that means it brings to the point that we are at times over reliance, or in a way, we are always like seeking, asking you make a choice, or we are, for instance, one time you mentioned we are so addicted to worship, right?
Yeah.
So that's one part. And the second main part is, so that's a main human role for us, because it's not the higher self who is going to make choice. It will only guide you. But as a human being, that's our responsibility as well as our main purpose to make choices in alignment. Correct?
Yeah. Well, the purpose of human life is to grow. Choices bring growth. Just some choices bring growth in a painful way. Some other choices bring growth in a delightful way. Life is full of a mixture because choices or lessons. What you we talked about this on Thursday a little bit. The play on the word lesson, meaning less on, it can be looked at that way because the catalysts make your distortions less if you choose correctly within them. You're trying to lessen the distortion by learning the right path. Our distortions are what deceive us. We're trying to figure out while we're veiled, how are my choices aligning me with the light and truth that I know and follow, or revealing more of it, or making it clearer, or are they darkening my path and making my path more difficult and more clumsy and painful? And that's the discernment we learned. That discernment is very, very important. The discernment is what sort of allowing us to choose and prompting us to choose through much more of the feeling center in the heart than the thinking center in the head. The heart is actually much more powerful in connecting. And that's why when we're going to talk about the veil in about a month, we're going to look at that, because the veil is between the conscious and subconscious mind. Subconscious mind is actually much more centered in the heart than in the head. Yeah. So the higher self knows the lessons to graduate with your postdoctorate or doctorate degree, how you pass the lessons, and if you can even pass all of them to graduate, is up to your effort. You choose how you're going to play as the student, but the curriculum is pretty much set. However, there are optional curriculum. If you've gone to university, you know that, right? There's prerequisite classes you must take, but then there's a lot more selective optional classes. And I think it's very similar in life. We get to choose some of the fun things we want to learn, experience, the fun sort of catalysts mixed in with some of the required ones. Sometimes the required ones are set uniquely for us because of karma, good karma or bad karma, right? Sometimes that writes into our next life or even a future this life, this experience to work through what happened back there. So it's all very fluid. It's like an interactive computer simulation that changes based upon every choice you make in every moment. It can alter the course of the program. It's not set like that. It's much more, there's much more involvement of your choice into what you experience here and now. It's not completely locked in, is kind of what I'm trying to say. That help?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Whoops, wrong way. That way. So we've already looked at this one, but let's just review it real quick. The 7 densities. And the reason that this is actually helpful and important is because we are a microcosm of this macrocosm. So this is the view that Ra gives of the creation of our octave. So when you think about, well, where the hell does it all fit in, and where's this life fit into the next life, et cetera, et cetera, this is how they would kind of explain it at a kind of summary level. we start with the first level of awareness of being, survival, reproduction, elements like earth, air, water, fire. So that's the first kind of dynamic level of awareness, very, very basic awareness, because we come from pure awareness, right? Consciousness is awareness. It's just knowing that you know, or knowing that you're having an experience, being aware of being aware. So the pure infinite consciousness then starts to focus at the very basic level. From there it goes to growth, which enables movement, seeking light, plants, animal life, etc. Second density. Third density is individual self-awareness. So this is where you become the finite self. This is where you become veiled for the first time to enable the choice of which path you'll take in seeking to love others. So service to self or service to others is about how you seek love. And that's the mission of this life. Once you have polarized sufficiently to whichever path you're going to take, that's when it splits into either a negative or positive path from there. But essentially, they both have the same purpose. In fourth density, where there's positive or negative, it's about love and understanding. So that's the density we're transitioning to now. So it is heaven on earth. It is a heavenly density because there's no conflict, there's no manipulation, there's no confusion. There's just clarity and connectedness in fourth density positive. And there's obedience and willingness to toe the line, like a very good military structure in fourth density negative. To become what is called a social memory complex, which is that telepathic connection, not able to deceive, very clear who you are, what you're about, what's going on. And a lot of their dedication is to be in service to third density, out of compassion, because they're just recently from there. They're most able to kind of understand the challenge of being in a veiled, sort of walking in darkness kind of life, which is what third density is. They also understand the intensity of third density and how sometimes traumatizing it can be. So specifically, fourth density positive spends a lot of time in roles of guiding and prompting, and that without intervening to take away your free will to that extent. Very, very hard, or very unwilling to push it that far, because in a sense that's going to incur a negative karma on them, as well as cause you to have to repeat the lesson because they took it away from you. It'd be like your professor coming up on the final exam or one of the important exams and telling the answers because you didn't study hard enough. Well, you're not learning, are you? So that's kind of how it would appear to them. Fifth density is the density of light and wisdom. So you mature as a social memory complex, become much more wise about how you demonstrate and express love, right? And they serve the density below. Sixth density is the balancing of love, light, and light, love. So it's about unity. And this is where the negative path joins back into oneness, because they have to balance their love for self with love for others, right? Or it blocks them if they can't. So that's a big struggle for them to do that, but they do it. And we balance understanding and wisdom, social memory complex. Higher self is here. So this is where your higher self lives. That's why that one's circled in red. It's actually at the higher end of sixth density. The other thing that Ra makes clear is each one of these levels, these 7 levels, exist in every density. So in sixth density, there's a sixth density at first level, second level, third level. Sixth density, third level is the last density where the negative beings can get. If they want to go to sixth density, fourth level, they have to learn to love others and let go of their self-centeredness, right? So that the midpoint of sixth density, remember that all levels are in each density is a sub-levels kind of thing. The negative path has to make a big change, a very big awakening for them. So higher self, sixth density, high being, that's again you at that level. And what Ra says is, right as you get up to close to going to graduate, you give yourself through time, in a sense, is to set up as the higher self to be the guide for you in fifth, fourth, and third density, right? So we'll look at more of commentary on that in a minute. Seventh density is the change where it's the completion stage. So it's the gateway to the next octave, return to source. So becoming sort of integrated into oneness and integrating all life experiences. And he says later on, this is where they stop looking back, like looking back to sixth, fifth, fourth, etc., and start looking forward to the next creation. Okay, so that's a mystery to them, but that's how they explain it. So that's from the context of what we're looking at, that's where the higher self resides. Questions there?
Nothing in the chat at this stage.
Okay. So the next thing that throws a bit of a spanner in this, Ra then talks about how the higher self actually has an even higher being called the mind, body, spirit totality that it draws information from. And so that's an interesting addition to sort of understanding this. So let's look at what he says. Ra says the higher self is that self which exists with full understanding of the accumulation of experiences of the entity, full understanding of all of the experiences that need to be accumulated of the entity through all the densities up through 6. It aids the entity in achieving healing of the experiences. And so it's interesting they use the word healing there. So healing for them is not just your body's got a sickness and we need to heal it. It's healing of the experiences which have not been learned properly. So their concept of healing is much more complete: mind, body, spirit healing, healing of trauma, healing of choices that were made in ignorance that have caused suffering on self or others, healing of all of that aspect of it, to achieving healing of the experiences which have not been learned properly, and assist, as you have indicated, in further life experience programming. So when you die, you go through that healing process, and then they assess what is it that the lessons you need now. It's almost like after each semester, you say, well, what are the classes that are right for me to take now? Some prerequisite classes you've already taken. Did you pass them, or do you need to retake them before you can go on to the higher level classes? It's kind of the same kind of analogy. So the higher self will help with that further life experience programming, as you may call it. He goes on. The mind, body, spirit complex totality. So now he's talking about that higher self, is that which may be called upon by the higher self aspect, just as the mind, body, spirit complex, us here, calls upon the higher self. So there's the relationship. The totality is an asset or a, kind of like a bank of all possible path knowledge that the higher self can call upon, just like you in mortality are able to call upon your 6th density higher self here. We have our helper is our higher self. The higher self's helper is the totality. He goes on a little bit. In the one case, you have a structured situation within space-time continuum, with the higher self having available to it the totality of experience. So within the whole of the 7th octave, the space-time continuum, the higher self has available to it the totality of experience, which have been collected by an entity and a very firm grasp of the lessons to be learned in this density. The mind, body, spirit complex totality is as the shifting sands, and is in some part a collection of parallel developments of the same entity. Just let that sink in for a minute. It's like the higher self can split into 3, 4 different yous and have parallel experiences. Now, he'll ask in a minute whether that happens simultaneously, and Ra says, well, it's not literally simultaneous, but kind of from your point of view, you can probably say that, but that's not completely right. But yes, the higher self can be a higher self for more than one version of you on parallel learning experiences. Can be more than one you. in whatever other dimensions or however you want to understand that. That's what he's saying. So the totality is able to look at all of those yous and all of the possible choices you could make on every single turning point, and every choice is a point where you choose one or the other path, and are able to inform the higher self as to, if they go this way, then this is what you can do to help. If they go this way, then these are the things that open up, but these things are closed, etc. That's kind of the way that I think they're trying to explain it. That's a bit mind-blowing because it's talking about the duality. The higher self is a higher self for more than one mind, body, spirit complex. Can be several of them. So just like the divine mind is able to fractal itself into infinite trillions of conscious individual beings, the higher self likewise can fractal itself into more than one conscious being that is at a lower level, or having a learning experience, going to school, if you like. And they might be at many different levels. They're not all in third density. Does that make sense? Any questions there?
Yes, there is actually. There's a couple from Larry and David. Would you like to speak, Larry, on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Andy. Going back to, so going to the next level, the same as going to the next octave.
Going to the next level from third to fourth density, or going from seventh density to the next octave, which would be the eighth density. Yes. Or, yeah.
So going from the seventh to the next eighth next level could be another octave.
Well, that is how they describe it. Yes. It's okay. Like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Then you say do again, don't you?
Got it. That's right. Okay. So is Ra alluding to the fact that we can have parallel lifetimes that are happening simultaneously?
Yes, he is.
Okay, and then another one here, 36.2. You talked about higher self having available to it the totality of experiences which have been collected by an entity and a very firm grasp. Who is this entity?
It is yourself again at seventh density. It is your higher self. I know that sounds a bit of an oxymoron, but they call it the mind, body, spirit complex totality. It's the total, complete, possible understanding. It's kind of almost like a computer program that's, and I don't know if this is a good analogy, but I would look at it as an AI computer program that can tell you every possible outcome of every choice on every path that you will or could take on your journey from third up to sixth density. And so the higher self can say, oh, Larry made a choice. I didn't expect that. Let me look into what that choice opens up and closes. And where does it look? It looks at the totality, that being, that entity, if you like. Yeah.
Right. So with that free will we have, the slightest difference, change, or choice we make can affect all future options.
It does, yes. Now, very often, though, if you've got a program catalyst that you need to have, they will rearrange it so that catalyst still happens. It just might happen in a little different way.
Well, right? Okay. So is that like changing one's life soul contract? Is it possible to change their soul contracts?
In a sense that if you, in a sense, it is, because your choices are paramount. So, and there's an example actually in the Bible where one of the prophets, I can't remember, it's in the Old Testament, was told that he was going to die, that his time was ready to die, and he prayed and prayed and prayed. I think it's one of the ancient prophets. He prayed and prayed and prayed, and then was told that he had a reprieve and he would have more time. So in that sense, he changed his soul contract because he chose to stay in incarnation for whatever reason. He felt a very urgent need or desire to do that, and petitioned earnestly enough, with enough faith and will, that they acquiesced and agreed. So it is possible. Same with people who for whatever different reasons, commit suicide, sometimes they're ending their soul contract before it's come due. They're ending the cycle before they've finished the classes. They're dropping out of school, in other words. And the contract was to finish the semester at least. So in that sense, you can. However, oftentimes if you've got programmed things that need to happen, specifically they'll usually happen like in class and school in an order where you'll learn this lesson and then the second lesson will build on the first lesson. If you haven't learned the first lesson well enough, then you'll find it will keep repeating in different ways over and over again. So if you find that you keep having the same kind of bullshit things happen to you, it has the same kind of nuanced feeling to it, that could well be a sign that there's a lesson that you're still needing to learn to move on. And if you keep pushing it away or ignoring it, it'll just keep coming back. And the reason for that is that's a requirement before you can actually go on to the better lessons or the higher lessons, right? Does that help, Larry?
does
Does
help.
that answer your question?
Helps a lot. Thank you, Scott.
Okay.
Let's head to Germany and say
Is there
goodbye.
other ones?
Got a question from Lou's got his hand up.
Go ahead, Lou. Can't hear you, Lou.
Wait a minute. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Sorry about that. So this concept or this definition about the higher self being divided, so to speak, in fractals, that is like these fractals all belong to the same one totality, higher self, but individually or collectively. What I mean is, it's my fractals that could be here and there and everywhere. They all belong to my one higher self, or is there a collective higher self? So my fractals are here and there and everywhere, but it doesn't matter. It's at the end, is it just one higher self for all the individuals?
It, in the way that Ra explains it, the higher self is you. You, literally you, your individual person at the higher octave. However, it's not just you. There might be three others that are versions of you, and it's the higher self is their higher self as well. It'd be like you having three clones, and they all go off and have different experiences. They all go off to different countries and have different life experiences. But in sixth density, they end up coming back, and all their learning goes back into the one original that they were cloned from, which we call the higher self. You want to think about it that way. It's not literally how it is. That's just a metaphor to kind of explain it.
Okay.
So your higher self is not exactly the same as Larry's or mine, because we're, at least I assume, we're quite different in our parts and in our dispositions, etc. Larry's higher self, your higher self, my higher self, Judy's higher self are all at the same level of sixth density and are serving in that way, but they're not just focused on you. There might be a Larry 2.0 in Russia and a Larry 3.0 in Australia. Who knows? I'm just saying that as an example. Or in another dimension, or at fifth density, right? He's saying that they could be at different levels of progression and different dimensions, even having the lessons that you need to have to evolve to that sixth density being. So what happens is, as you come together, you start to assimilate the knowledge of the others' use. There was an experience I had when I was in Wellington, and I used to go walking a lot down by the beach at Titahi Bay. And there was an experience I had where I had a very clear vision of getting into a fight with this group of teenage 20-year-old guys and one girl at this very specific spot. And I realized that was the vision, not of, it wasn't something that was going to happen to me. It was something that had happened in a similar situation to another version of me or another part of me. And I realized that they were very much troubled by what happened there. And the higher self was asking, in a sense, if I wanted to donate energy or support to it to help it. And that's kind of hard to explain it, but in my mind, that was a way that I was connecting through my higher self to another version of me on a different life experience, but fairly similar life experience. So I realized that there was, I got connected enough to know there was at least 2 or 3 other versions having somewhere in some dimension a life experience later on to combine into the full total experience of the higher self. So the higher self is the bringing back together of these fractal pieces. Just like when you go to 7th density, all of this octave comes back together into unity, into the logos of this unity. Jesus said, I and my Father are one. You and your higher self are one, but so is the other version of you one with the higher self. So you and that other version, in a sense, are one. It's a kind of a mirror, if you like, image of you having other experiences that you won't have to have, because they will share that light and knowledge and growth just as you will share yours through the higher self as you come back into unity. And we'll talk about that in a minute. He talks about how we end up coming back into a sense of togetherness or unity. We don't stay fractal. The fractal is an illusion because there's really only one being. That's why they call it the law of one.
Mhm.
One being having this dream, right? But when they dream Lou, they might dream Lou on having coffee on the streets of France, and they might dream Lou in Germany doing whatever work was doing there. They might dream Lou even as a woman in a play in Britain, right? They can have simultaneous, if you like, call it that, dreams of Lou doing different things, but it's the one being that's having that. So we're not the key is that we have very hard time getting past our sense of separateness. And what the law of one is really trying to help us grasp is that's really part of this illusion only. When you go into the other dimensions and when you go into the time space when you die, that illusion is erased quite quickly, and you realize I'm not separate anywhere near like I believed I was. That's 3rd density illusion.
So
That,
that is to So that is to say that we remain, or we have this individuality as long as we need to keep learning, and it will be automatically disappearing as we are learning our lessons in order to become a one.
yeah. And again, it'll be all by choice. We will see that the next step
Correct.
is to become part of the unity with our higher self. And it's not that you'll lose anything other than your illusions. You'll only lose that which is not helpful or useful or which is distorted.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, good, excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Good evening, Judy.
Good evening. Hi there. I'd just like to ask you one thing, Scott. Oh gosh, I've forgotten it. Just a moment. Yes. I we're infinite. There's no beginning and there's no end. We've got individuality and we've got infinite qualities too. So we'll never end. And Divine Mother says we never stop learning. Learning goes on
Yeah.
for infinity too. And so I'm just wondering if Ra mentions anything about when we go to the seventh density, when we leave the seventh density and go into the next octave. And I suppose the first density in the next octave will be the eighth density. We move through that octave and then we go into the next octave, and the octaves will go on for infinity.
Yes, he does. He says it exactly like that. They are infinite, many number of octaves. And I think what happens, it's like we go into an octave, like in first density of whichever octave it is, and we sort of separate out or shatter out, have experiences up through sixth, and then in seventh we come back and then move into the next octave, almost like passing through the hourglass, right?
Yeah.
The sound passed through the hourglass. We come back into a kind of a unity, make decisions or whatever happens in that unity of what the next octave will look like that we will create, and then we blossom out into that one.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
billions of years into that one, and then it comes back. So it's the ever heartbeat of going out and coming back, going out and coming back. It's an eternal heartbeat.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, and what he does say though is that they don't plumb or understand what the next octave is, because that's not given to them. But they do say they have, at their level, they have teachers or wanderers from the next octave that come back periodically to teach them, to help them prepare for the transition through seventh. So that's interesting. But that's the
So it's
only
a long
connection
trip,
they
isn't
have.
it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So
Judy.
that's all in line with the Lord one. It's absolutely. Thank you. Go ahead, Andy.
Thanks, Judy. Lee had her hand up just before. Lee, do you still have a question?
Hi. No, I was just going to ask pretty much what Scott answered about the higher self having been a fractal, and each experience could be on different dimensions. So you may have graduated, and a part of the higher self may want to have another experience in 3D, so then decide to fractal off. Is that
Yeah, if I understand right, it's exactly how it seems to work. And I think wanderers are a fractal of the sixth density higher self, choosing to come back to third density, not so much for themselves, but to be of service. But they gain something of great value from it too. So there's always a benefit on both sides of the coin. But yes, I think multidimensional for sure, and many pieces of the fractal could very well be operating outside of third density space-time. That they could be operating in a number of different ways. And to plumb and understand that, it's very difficult for us because of how separate and time-bound we are in this illusion. It's very hard to see through that. But that's what they're hinting at, exactly what you're saying there, Lee. Yeah.
Thanks, Lee. Jackie, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. If the number of octaves is infinite, how does that square with the fact that as spirits we descend and then we ascend back into unity?
That's what's happening with that heartbeat.
Cycle.
Yeah, at the end of the cycle, we come back into unity, and then in the next octave, we spread back out. We separate back out into having whatever version of experience that octave is inviting us to have. And Ra makes it clear that this isn't our first octave. There was an octave before this one. One of the things we brought with us from the last octave is our mind, body, spirit complex, the kind of the psychological makeup of our mind, body, spirit complex thing. There was aspects of that he said we learned in the previous octave. So each octave seems to build on the learning of the previous one. But so to me, that's it. You come back into unity and then you separate out. Come back into unity, separate out. From first to seventh is the separating and coming back process. on for
So
eternity.
it never ends.
That's what Ra says, and that's simply because the infinite being that we are all one of has no limit on imagination and on infinite possibility. That's what infinite means. It does not end. It's a process of eternally knowing itself, putting itself in these different catalytic experiences to know itself in all its different ways and dimensions. Yeah. It knows itself through experiencing itself through us. We are the means of it coming to know and experience itself within its own self. Again, it's in its own mind that it's doing this. We are in the dream of the divine mind, right? So just like when you wake up from a dream and you go, wow, what an amazing dream that was. I was flying, or I was walking with angels, or I was underwater and I could breathe, or whatever you dreamt, and you remember it vividly. It's like, wow, it's kind of an exciting thing to remember. And often people go write those kind of dreams down. Not all dreams you can remember, but oftentimes the very vivid ones. Well, in a sense, that's an analogy, I think, of what the divine being is doing, is purposefully creating these scenarios to understand itself, wanting to know, well, what would I do if I didn't know that if I made that choice, it would cause these things? Would I make that choice? And what if the situation was different? Would I do something different? And instead of just musing on that, it goes, well, let's see. Let's create an entity, a fractal of me, and put them in that situation. And then I'll know what I would do, because that fractal is me.
Well, that means that we are eternally put through hoops just so the creator can understand and experience.
By our choice, by our choice, because we are that being. We want to have those experiences. Like you choose to go to university and study what you study. Unless for some reason someone forced you to do it. But even if they did, you could always drop out or get kicked out. Or, I mean, it's very hard to think of any situation where you don't have choice. Frankl talked about that as a prisoner in Auschwitz. Even under that kind of confinement and that kind of horror, he noted that the incarcerated prisoners with him, that the Jews that were with him, and Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning as a result of this. He wrote in there how they either chose to be in service to self or in service to others. He didn't say it that way, but that's what happened. Some of them become real selfish bastards to each other that were even worse to the other prisoners than the guards were. And others became unified and saintly and helping. And if people were sick, they would give them pieces of their little bit of moldy bread, etc., try and help them through it. And that was a personal choice. Even being in that situation, they couldn't take that choice away. Some people surrendered and committed suicide in there, which, completely understandable in a horrific situation like that. But they all had still choice. And so I think that's a great example of the fact that you're not put through hoops if you don't want to. If you don't want to go and have that lesson, then they'll say, well, here's your options. What do you want to do?
Well, no, there's no ultimate choice. You are in this cycle, never-ending hoops, never-ending octaves. When do we get to retirement and rest?
I think the answer to that would be whenever you choose. If you go to the next life, you die and you say, hey, I don't want to go down anymore. Well, they'll say, okay, hang out here. What do you want to do? Right? I mean, if it's really up to you. There's no forced growth. There's just opportunity to grow. But the paradigm is that after a while, you're going to say, I want to do something. I'm sick of sitting on my couch doing nothing. I want to get up and do something. It might be great for a couple of millennium. I don't know. Depends on how tired you are. Usually, though, if people don't want to do something, they really need to heal and revive. And so I think we're very limited from this perspective on what our options are. The truth is, it's always your choice. You're not forced into anything. Okay. And so if you don't want to come down and do this kind of incarnation, they might say, well, why don't you, would you like to serve as a spirit guide, as someone's guardian, or would you like to work on creating a new solar system and be part of that effort? And there's an infinite number of imaginative things that entities of intelligence can be doing. Not all of them is coming down and doing this, but all of them are learning experiences. That's the point. It's all learning about, it's all the infinite being learning about itself, coming to know itself through the illusions that it creates for experience, for catalyst of learning, and accept itself, right? It's interesting that it talks a lot here about aids the entity in achieving healing of the experiences which have not been learned properly. Well, there's a lot of those. And so, you know, that again, it's you're not just dumped into something and then you have a horrible experience and then, oh, well, just don't do that again. There's going to be a deprogramming, if you like, or a debriefing of what did happen, what did you choose, what was the purpose of that. From the outside of the veil, it will all become quite clear of why that happened and what was the where, when, and where did you make the choices that enabled that to happen that way, and what would you do differently if what would be changed to make that a different experience that was a deeper or better learning experience. And then that's offered to you. And if you say, no, I don't want to do that, well, okay, well, what other version of that would you like? That's the way I read it, it's a much more of a conversational, cooperative thing with your higher self, who again is you. It's kind of like you saying, you know, I know what you're going through because I went through it. But this is part of the growth thing. And sometimes, like, giving birth to a child is a very painful thing, but it's also very rewarding for most women.
Yes, so we can move at our own pace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everybody moves at their own pace. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, Jackie. We'll come to Ray shortly, and also Lou. Quick comment in the chat related to that for you, Scott, from Larry. He says, so we are God's novelty with infinite possibilities and no ending to who we are.
In a sense, but I think the word novelty is a little demeaning connotatively, in that it's like we're just a plaything. No, we are it. God or the infinite intelligent infinity, as Ra puts it, is wanting earnestly to know what it is and understand itself in completeness by having myriads and myriads of eternal experiences, testing, learning, enjoying, suffering. All of that teaches it about itself. So the novelty of a newness of it is maybe a good way to use the word novelty in that sense, in that we're looking for challenges and catalysts that create us a new situation that shows something else about ourselves. Like you do, everybody thinks that they'll be brave until they're put in a situation where it's terrifying, and then they either choose and are brave, or they run away and are not. But who knows what they'll do until they're put in that situation, right? And I think that's an example of this. So the situation is a novel situation that challenges you to a point where you make a choice. And then, interestingly, then when you reflect on that choice, you go, wow, I learned something about myself there. That was, I'm pleased with what I chose there, or I'm a little embarrassed about that. I wish I hadn't have acted that way. And either way, there's great learning about yourself. Doesn't matter which choice you made so much as what did you glean from that, I think, is the point.
Could I just say something there, Scott?
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go, could it be kind of likened to life flows, existence flows, it doesn't stay still, life flows. So could it be like we hop onto the flow and we flow with the flow into infinity and have all those experiences of all those octaves, or we can hop off at any stage. We don't have to stay on the back of the flow. We can hop off and have a rest. but then we could always hop back on again when we want to.
I think so. I think with one caveat is when you hop off the flow, you're still kind of in the flow because you don't just stop. Nothing stops happening. There's always a fluid moment of the now. It just might be a very quiet, peaceful pause, but that's still in that flow, isn't it? Right. And so it's not really possible to hop off because eternity is the present now, the eternal now. And so you can't hop out of that. It's being. You can't stop being, just like you can't stop having experience. Even in dreaming and sleeping, it's an experience. Even when you're unconscious, like you're having surgery, that's an experience. It's just a blank experience. So it seems like that you're not having experience, but you really are. It's the experience of being completely unaware of what they're doing to you physically. But there's a whole nother level to that. So I think I think what the caveat would be to jump out of the flow is to cease to be. And I don't know that that's an option because we're an eternal being. And so you can cease to be in the rapids, and you can go over and pause. Say, if you're going down a rapid river, you can say, I don't want to go down the rapids, and you can go off to the shore and park on the shore for a while and camp. But you're still having experience. It's just a less traumatic experience or a less demanding experience, maybe is the right word.
Or even to go into a slower moving tributary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Other questions there?
Thanks, Judy. Ray, we'll come to you shortly, Lou.
Yeah, just a brief question. As Lee was saying, and then again, it's going all around that point. So suppose one of our fractal has already been in 7 density. We have multi-million of lifetimes. So whenever we are asking for any help, so basically we can invite, we need to ask, as Scott, you mentioned many times that we need to ask. Right? So we can ask our own fractal beings, different parts of being. Suppose if it is a question of healing or any other support we need in a particular time here in physical self, this physical self being, we are facing any challenge or anything or disease or anything. So we can ask different fractal, our own fractals, our own experience to come and help us. Just similar like in the Matrix when Trinity wanted to ride that helicopter. So she was reaching to her programming. Has she ever been trained to run that helicopter?
Yeah, interesting. The Lord One doesn't talk about connecting with or asking the other fractal yous who are having third density or other density experiences. They talk about you asking your higher self. So it's almost like your connection is with your higher self. If the higher self, like what my experience was, I wasn't getting asked by the other fractal for help after they had that experience where they were in that fighting challenge situation. I was being asked by my higher self, do I want to offer energy to them? So it was a connection up through that. I think that's the way it's ordered. So it's yes, you can, but it's more through the higher self. The higher self is the one that you should approach and look at as your chief guardian, your chief source of light and support and guidance. They're personally and intimately invested in your success because they are you.
So in that case, it is just like let's say, line manager. Our line manager is our higher self. All we have to ask our higher selves. But higher self's main purpose is not only to guide us, but to help and support us in all manners, whatever it can actually, it has all the possibilities, right?
The key is that it's in service to you to support your success, but you must ask. It won't force that service and help on you. I think the caveat is it has an overriding kind of standoffish guardianship, almost like the parent watching the children at the playground. They're not over there trying to make them go down the slide or try and make them be safe climbing up the ladder. They're just keeping an eye on them. But if the child cries, the parent runs over and says, how can I help you? It maybe is another analogy. It's always watchful, it's always present with you, but it's not going to intervene unless you need it to or ask it to, specifically call upon it to. And then it will do it in a way that doesn't infringe upon your choice. It will do it with promptings and subtle guidance. So the other caveat is we've got to learn how to hear it, listen to it, how to receive that guidance.
Here I have one question which I have been for a long time. So for instance, it's only when we cry, then the higher, or when we ask, then the higher self will come. For instance, like it's another metaphor or example we always give. The mother will give feed or food or milk to the child when the child will start crying. So if the child is not crying, if the child is quiet, knowing well, my mother knows what is my right time to drink milk or like that, then. So as in number of, again, scriptures and other places, it is written, he knows everything. He means our higher selves, let's say. So when we need help, we might not be crying. We are just asking, you know better, or you know everything. So if you're not asking, we will not get help.
Well, it's an interesting question because there's many ways that we ask. The obvious way is to consciously say, I'm calling upon my higher self for guidance here. And that's a direct asking. But oftentimes, even people who aren't aware of their higher self do call upon and ask by the yearnings of their heart, by how they're experiencing their feelings and they're expressing, I really need, and they don't know what they need, but they need something, and that resonant feeling of calling out to the universe, the higher self hears that too. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a conscious one. However, once you're aware that you have a higher self, consciously calling upon it is a very wise use of that asset.
Okay, sorry, I have a tiny more question. Suppose there are people, like sometimes they are angry, in an angry mood. And they say, no, I'm not going to ask anything. God doesn't help, or it never happens, etc. They are really, really angry against their higher self or God or anyone. So what about in such cases? Last question, this is for now.
Well, it would be very similar that if your daughter was very angry at you and you know she needed some guidance in that, but you needed to set some parameters, she's very angry for whatever thing, it might be misperceived or whatever, do you just pull back and go, well, the hell with her then? No, you still love her, right? And you're just going to wait for the right time when you can come back and say, let me help you through this, or let me explain, but sometimes you got to let them time to calm down. It's no different than that.
Beautiful. I think this is a good example. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks, Ray. Lou, you've been waiting a wee while. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks, Andy. I didn't make it on time. My point is related to the previous subject, but I didn't make it on time before Ray, and you did not notice my hand that I was just pointed up. So may I go on to my question now, although it is
Well, just ask the question, and we'll just be as succinct as we can, Lou.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot, and sorry for the interruption. What you explained it last, not on Ray, but on Jackie, and also related to Judy, that sort of confused me in a sense that if we can always make a choice of coming back after we have changed octaves, that we have, then that means that our individuality does exist. And I thought that we will be integrated to one. So if it does exist, then that comes my other question, and that is, what happens when we change? We go through all the densities or dimensions all the way up to the 8th, and that is where we just become on the octave at that level, a new creation, and then the process starts all over again. So if my individuality remains up all the way up to that level, even in this oneness, that confuses me. And if that's so, then what do I bring into the next octave, then the next creation? If my individuality remains in a way. Do you understand what I'm saying now?
Yeah, it's maybe the best analogy would be if you were a violinist in an orchestra. You could be an average one, a poor one, a masterful one, or anywhere in between. So as you grow through the octaves, you're learning how to play your particular music better and better and more different songs. You're learning more. If you didn't apply yourself, you might only play one song well or three songs well, whereas the master can play 100, 1,000 songs well. The difference is that in sixth density, you're the master. At third density, you're the beginner, if you like. So what changes is your capability to be you, to resonate with your energy, to resonate with that special vibratory energy that is uniquely you. You just get better and more attuned to it, more capable. So as you come together with the many versions of you, it's like they're all playing maybe the same type of instrument, but different versions of it. One might be like an orchestra, brilliant violinist that would play a Stradivarius, but another might be a master fiddler from the outbacks of America in the South there. Both of them very skilled, but play a different version of the same kind of skills. So I think what changes is your capability to be even more nuanced and magnificent in who you are as an individual. And when you come back into the oneness, it's just you're joining the master level of the orchestra where you all harmoniously play the song together. You're not all playing different tunes now. You're all harmoniously finding where your uniqueness adds to the beauty of the whole. Right? And then when you go into the next octave, well, maybe there you choose to learn a different instrument. I don't know. Maybe you learn then to play the cello instead of the violin, for example. And you go through that octave learning the new instrument that adds again to your uniqueness and your capability to add to the whole orchestra.
So that means that we do not lose individuality, even in the oneness, correct? That's what I'm trying to understand now. So I
think that there's a version of that. There's some people that say that you dissolve back into the sea of unity and you become that. I think we just become more and more aware of all the aspects of the orchestra. And we become so aware and connected to it that we become unified in a very deep sense. The level of unity, even Raz says, is still unfathomable or a mystery to them.
So we don't lose
still on that learning journey, even at their level. Yeah.
So we don't lose it. We don't, to an extent, we don't lose this difference, this individuality, in order to keep on learning.
The only things we lose are our illusions that keep us in a separateness. So anything of value and of beauty and of uniqueness that's you is treasured. Ra makes it very clear. That's why would we want to lose that? Why would we want to squash that into just something that's everything's the same? It's the uniqueness of the individuals that make the orchestra so beautiful. They all just play exactly the same instrument in exactly the same way. Well, you might as well just listen to one of them then. They're playing all sorts of nuanced, wonderful things that make the music they're playing absolutely magnificent, right? And so I think that's the better analogy, rather than we all end up just banging on a drum together without any more uniqueness. Uniqueness is not lost. What that means as far as individuality, I think is yet to be understood, but it's certainly not lost in the octave that we're going to, and Ra implies it continues on, and implies that that's what's valued. That's part of what the whole one being, the divine mind, is creating in each of the dreams that we are, is capabilities that are valued, absolutely treasured. So you don't take all your jewels that are all different, beautiful, and try and mash them into one jewel, and then you can't tell one apart, because you lose the beauty of each individual one in that mashing them together. It feels like you'd lose something rather than gain something from that. And I think that's maybe another way of looking at it. We're not doing this experiment to throw it out the window and say, oh, well, that was fun. Well, I guess now we can all just sit back and be just sort of in the oneness of just being an infinite awareness of doing nothing. It's all about coming to know what are all of the options and possibilities, and they're infinite, and so it'll continue to go on. And so I don't know that your uniqueness will disappear, but it does change. Just like when you're in grade school, the personality, the knowledge, and your ability to contribute to your own experience is very different than it is now, because you've learned so much more since then. But it's still you, isn't it?
Okay, so we do bring that into the next octave, the next creation. It does make a difference. The next
I believe
creation will be a continuation, an upgraded continuity of the previous one.
that's strongly implied, but Ra does say we do not fathom the next octave. Our knowledge is of this octave, and our knowledge is clear on what this octave requires. The next octave is still veiled to them in a sense, because I think when the next octave happens, we create it together. So it's not created until they actually make it. So they can't fathom what hasn't been born yet. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, we build it together. And so who knows what we'll build? I think
Okay.
there'll be parameters and things, but who knows what we will create. But being creative is part of an expression of the divine or infinite intelligence. It is infinitely creative. And so your own creativity and your own desire to be creative, I mean, if you think about the times when you find most fulfilling, there are often times when you creatively solve a problem, or create something beautiful, like as an art or something, or write something beautiful. It's a creation. Being creative is a way that we connect to that divine aspect within ourselves. So certainly that's ever an eternal aspect of what we are.
Okay. Yeah, okay, good. It's I'm grateful that you clarify that. It's much more clear now.
Okay.
And it makes more sense. So okay, thank you.
Thanks,
My
Lou. There's nothing further pending, Scott.
Okay. So we might end up cutting this short and do part 2 next time, so we don't go too long. But you monitor the time right now. I'm looking. It's just about 9:10, so we'll go on a little more. But I'd much rather engage in the deeper discussions than just try and get through it. That's where the value is. So I'm happy to finish up when people have gotten to the point where their cup is full. And I'll let Bob, you, Andy, and Lee just let me know if it's gotten to that point, because it's easy to pick it up. We can add it on next time or next month, whenever we want to do it.
Oh, I'm more than happy to go till 10:30, whatever. Just if everyone's happy to continue, I'm happy to keep recording.
Yeah, well, we'll just gauge the group to see. I don't want people to feel like this is an endurance contest. It should be enjoyable, and it's easy to pick it up from where we left off if we need to stop it. But let's just see where we go now. So 57.6. This is Don talking. You said that each third density entity has a higher self in the 6th density, which is moving to the mind-body-spirit complex of the entity as needed. Does the higher self also evolve and grow through the densities? beginning with the first density, and does each higher self have a corresponding higher self advanced in densities beyond it? To simplify this concept is our intent. In other words, he's asking a pretty muddled concept, but I think Ra gets the idea. He says, let me make this simple for you. The higher self is a manifestation given to the late sixth density mind, body, spirit complex or individual as a gift from its future self. Okay. The mid seventh density last action before turning towards the allness of the creator and gaining spiritual mass is to give this resource to the sixth density self. That resource is the totality part. So that's that AI kind of program, if you like, or aspect of the self that knows every possible choice on every possible path that the individual can and will make along its journey in this moving you as you measure time in a stream of time. Again, this is difficult for us to comprehend because we see time linearly, very hard in any other way within this dimension, whereas they do not. And they're trying to explain something that's outside of time to people who are convinced that time flows in a linear fashion. And so our perspective, our blinders, make it very difficult to sort of understand how to tease that out. He goes on though, this self, the mind, body, spirit complex of late sixth density, has then the honor duty of using both the experiences of its total living bank or memory of experiences or memory of experienced thoughts and actions, and using the resources of the mind, body, spirit complex totality left behind as a type of infinitely complex thought form. In this way, you may see yourself, your higher self or oversoul, and your mind, body, spirit complex totality as 3 points in a circle. The only distinction is that of your time-space continuum. All are the same being. So it's you at 3 different points in time, but it's the same being. It's all are the same being. So this is the key part here. See yourself, your higher self, and your mind, body, spirit complex totality as 3 points in a circle. The next just add this, we'll just do this in the next one and then ask, because each one clarifies it a little bit, just so we can get through and see if I answer some questions before you need to ask them, but we'll go back if you need to. So there it goes. There is a dimension in which time does not have sway. So there you go. In this dimension, the mind, body, spirit, in its eternal dance of the present, may be seen in totality. And before the mind, body, spirit complex, which then becomes a part of the social memory complex, is willingly absorbed into the allness of the one creator, the entity knows itself in its totality. So that's what that mind, body, spirit totality thing is. This mind, body, spirit complex totality functions as, shall we say, a resource for what you perhaps would call the higher self. The higher self, in turn, is a resource for examining the distillations of third density experiences and programming further experience. This is also true of density 4 and 5 and 6, with mind, body, spirit complex totality coming into consciousness in the course of 7th density. So it's you through the densities from 3rd through 7th, outside of time, dimension in which time does not have sway. So the summary of it, I think, is the next one. Thought I had a summary of it. Oh, there it is. But we'll go back to those ones. But this is the summary of it. So the mind, body, spirit complex totality is a 7th density, sees all timelines and all possible learning paths in all simultaneous parallel selves. That's a huge thing to comprehend just there, but that's what the totality means. The higher self is the 6th density integrated and unified entity of all mind, body, spirit individuals from all lower densities. So it's integrated and unified entity of all the versions at all lower densities and all lower timelines and versions of that. It draws wisdom from the totality, from this guy, to guide multiple souls into navigating a path to become the unified higher self in sixth density. So they're guiding them through the third, fourth, and fifth density to bring them into same level that they're at. So they've arrived, they've graduated. It's been a grueling, entertaining experience, full, rich experience. And they look back and go, I'd like to kind of guide back in time myself through these versions a little bit. I'd like to offer that service back because, again, time is not as connected linearly as we think. So outside of time, they're able to do that. The social memory complex, so there's another aspect of this, is in fourth, fifth, and sixth and seventh densities, the individual mind, body, spirit complex, the self, in telepathic unity with third density graduated soul family. So when we graduate from here into fourth density, you create a soul family that becomes a memory, social memory complex because you're telepathically linked. From then on, and you not only link with that soul family, other higher density social memory complex groups from other families and worlds. The telepathic link between like the Ra group and the Yahweh group and the Michael group or whatever, they're able to link in and connect with each other. It's not just that you just link to your family, but we start by learning it when we graduate from third density, which is what we're trying to do now. We become a soul family. And then we develop this concept of being a social memory complex. So this is where we kind of join the orchestra. Up until now, we've been playing the instrument alone. This is where we really learn to harmonize and join the orchestra and follow the conductor, however you want to kind of picture that. Then the mind, body, spirit complex is here now in third density, present in the veiled mortal experience of the choice point regarding love, service to self or service to others. So this is the individual that we see as our separate selves. This is in fourth, fifth, and sixth and seventh density where we become linked with other beings. This is the higher version of you that's the integrated, unified entity of all of the individuals, of all of these ones that have gone through all of these levels, integrates into the higher self. So it comes back, so it knows all of what you need to do and all other versions of you have done and will do, and all the learning from that. So it's able to give you expert kind of guidance on that. It's like hiring the Sherpa to take you up Mount Everest that went up with Hillary. That if you're the second one to go, the best thing you can do is hire one of those Sherpas that went up the last time because they know the way, right? That's the wisdom part of that. But if you choose not to listen to him, that's, again, your choice. And then this totality is the completeness of not only all the learnings, but all of the possible choice points and outcomes, because sometimes these individual mind, body, spirit complexes make a choice in a situation that is unexpected. Nothing is predestined. So there can be surprises. And part of those surprises is part of the fun of that we're all learning it together. Okay, so that's kind of the summary of what's going on. Those other, yeah, so we went from there. So do you have questions about, again, that aspect of there's you outside of time, different versions of that?
There's nothing in the chat at this stage and no hands up.
Okay, great. So here's where it talks about more than one of you, right out of the law one. So Don asked about the Seth material, and the Seth material was other channel material, and some of you are probably quite familiar with the Seth material. It's quite good. And so it was published, I think it was published in the 50s or 60s, I can't remember. So he says, as out of the Seth material, we have a statement here. Seth says that each entity on earth is one aspect or part of a higher self or oversoul, which has many aspects or parts in many dimensions, all of which learn lessons which enable the higher self to progress in a balanced manner. Ra says the correctness of this statement is variable. The more in balance an entity becomes, the less the possible probable vortices may need to be explored in parallel experiences. So that's an interesting statement. The more imbalanced that you become, and the more you progress up the continuum, the more balanced you become, the less there's a need for other versions of you to go out and do kind of parallel experiences. That's how I read what he's saying there. And Don says, do I understand from this then that the higher self or oversoul may break down into numerous units if the experience is required to what we would call simultaneous experience, different types of catalysts, and then oversee these experiences? So Ra says, yes. However, this statement we cannot say to be correct or incorrect due to the confusion of what you call time. He's going to say the fact that Don said simultaneous experience is what Ra has trouble with, because it's not literally simultaneous by the way that we understand it. So then he goes on to here. True simultaneity, how to say that, is available only when all things are seen to be occurring at once. This overshadows the concept of which you speak. The concept of various parts of the being living experiences of varying natures simultaneously is not precisely accurate due to your understanding that this would indicate that this was occurring with true simultaneity. This is not the case. The case is from universe to universe, and parallel existences can then be programmed by the higher self, giving the information available from the mind-body-spirit complex totality regarding the possible vortex at any crutch. So it doesn't have to happen instantly at the same moment, but it does happen in that there's a fractaling. There are more than one. That's kind of the point here. There's likely to be, your higher self is an oversoul of more than one mind, body, spirit complex, or one Scott or Lee or Larry or Andy or etc. There's likely that way, because that's what he's talking about here. However, he does give this caveat: the more balanced an entity becomes, the less that's necessary. Questions about that? This is just showing you what we were stating before, and we kind of talked through it with the questions, but this is where it says it in the Law of One.
No questions, Scott.
Okay. You in reality, so does the higher self have a sixth density mind body spirit complex that is separate unit from the mind body spirit complex? Yes. The higher self is the entity of mid-sixth density which, turning back, offers the service to itself. The way I see it right now is that I'm existing, this is Don speaking again, that I'm existing in two different locations, here and in mid-sixth density simultaneously. Is this correct? You are existing at all levels simultaneously. So that just throws another wrench into it.
Sorry, Scott, can I just chime in there? Just on the chat, can you read the last sentence that wasn't showing on the previous screen, please?
Down the no, wait a minute, let me go back. Oh, down here. I'll read from here. The case is from universe to universe, and parallel existences can then be programmed by the higher self, given the information available from the mind-body-spirit complex totality regarding the possible vortexes at any crutch. In other words, at any point in the road where there's choices, at any choice point, the possible vortex is there. So the parallel existence can then be programmed by the higher self, by him drawing or it drawing information from the totality regarding those possible choice points.
Awesome. Hope that answers your question, Jackie.
Okay. So
sorry, Andy. Yeah, no, it's just the very, very last word I didn't hear.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't show up through Zoom for some reason.
No, it's always missing. So it was the probable possible vortex. What was after that?
Let me say it again. Hang on. Totality regarding the probability, possibility vortexes at any crux. CRUX.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're here. He's asking mid sixth density somewhere. I'm existing in 2 points right now, where I am right now, and there's my higher self in sixth density. Is that right? And he says you're existing at all levels simultaneously. It is specifically correct that the higher self is you in mid sixth density, and in your way of measuring what you know as time, your higher self is yourself in the future. So there's where Ra is saying what we've been saying. So he asks again, am I correct in assuming that the mind body spirit complexes that exist in the levels below mid sixth density have a higher self in mid sixth density? Is that correct? Yes. The higher self does not manipulate its past selves. This is Ra saying. It protects. Now, this is the key point. This is the higher self's role. It protects when possible. It guides when asked, but the force of free will is paramount. So there's the key to the relationship of calling upon your higher self. It will protect you when possible, when necessary, etc., when it can, without interfering with your free will. It guides you when asked, called upon, whether it's consciously, subconsciously, from the heart, however you want to understand that, but it will guide you. It doesn't say it guides you when it wants to, it guides you when it's asked. Who does the asking? You do, because the force of free will is paramount. The seeming contradictions of determinism and free will melt when it is accepted that there is such a thing as true simultaneity. The higher self is the end result of all the development experienced by the mind body spirit complex to that point. So that's how determinism and free will merge together as both sides, two sides of one coin, right? There's determined specific classes you need to graduate, but how you apply the lessons and apply yourself in the classes is completely up to you. And there's a bunch of optional classes you can choose and sometimes add them as you go, right? That weren't maybe part of the plan. So there's the way that if Larry wants to talk about changing your soul contract, it's not a contract that's sort of set in iron like a legal contract. It's more of like, here's your map, but you can take some detours along the way. You're still going along the path. You can take detours. It's more of a map than a absolutely firm, I must do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. I would look at it more in that way. And this is how he's saying it works between you and the other using your higher self. Any questions about that piece?
No questions, Scott.
Okay, so we already did this summary. Just summarize again, like we went back. I just wanted to go back and show you where it said it in the Law of One, because there's so much nuance in their words that you might gain insights that I
Sorry,
missed.
Scott, I'll just chime in there. One question off the chat just come through from Jackie. Is this right? The higher self is the final evolution of the MBS complex. The latter is the evolving soul.
By the latter.
Jackie, do you want to clarify on that?
Well, the latter is the mind body spirit complex. Is this, as I understand it, we have a soul, which is the God, higher self, which is the God spark. That's the eternal part of us. The part of us that is evolving is our soul, and it goes through the experiences to evolve itself. But I know there's a lot of misunderstanding regarding this. It's very different. Everyone has got different terminology. Could we equate mind body soul complex to the soul, to the evolving soul?
Yeah, let me. I hear what you're saying. The interesting thing about the Ra material is it tries very hard not to couch this in religious theological language. They try very hard not to. The Course in Miracles is also very good channeling, but it couches it in a religious context. So some people that's off-putting. What Ra did here is try not to. So he doesn't use a lot of those religious terms. Very rarely ever says the term God. for that very reason. And so I think what you're saying is the higher self is kind of like the full, is the soul. The mind, body, spirit complex is a fractal of that soul, a piece of it that's on a journey back to completion, right? Social memory complex is where a bunch of fractal souls, pieces of souls, are learning how to link up and sort of learning how to bypass the sense of separateness that they learned in third density. The third density separateness is actually quite a unique situation, and it really is only caused by the veil. And we'll learn about that next month when we talk about the veil. But we never had a sense of separateness. There was a time when third density didn't have a veil, and that's quite interesting. So we'll go into the history of that because third density ended up becoming a holiday camp, and people just got lazy and hung out, and the universe got a little bit frustrated with that. That's when they decided, hey, we need to do something about this because they're not getting polarized enough to graduate, so they just keep coming back. And so that's when the veil got introduced billions of years ago, and that really intensified this mind, body, spirit, third density experience. And in fact, that's when the term complex come in. Before the veil, it was just called the mind, body, spirit. It became the mind, body, spirit complex because the veil separated parts of the mind that we have access to consciously. But again, we're going into next month's thing. The reason I'm bringing that up is because I've been studying that lately. I think if we're going to talk about the soul, like Ra does use the term oversoul to refer to higher self, because that's actually what Seth used as the term. So he refers to it the same way. So I think that's a safe bet to say that you think about your divine spark soul, it is that higher self that oversees you, and that you are a piece of it.
Yes.
You're not separate from it. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Jackie. No further questions, Scott.
Okay. So we're at 9:30. Do we want to? Well, let me look here. Hang on a second. Let me just look. Yeah.
We did start late.
Yeah, we did, but people have lives. We'll do this one, and then I'll check in with you and see before we go into a full. We're not too far from it. Let me just see. No, that didn't work, did it? Yeah. Let me see where we are. We're on 10. Oh, it's 12. So yeah, we're almost there, anyways.
Sweet.
I couldn't remember how many we got. So I've only got a couple more after this, so I think we can get through it. For the purpose of life, what is it all about? So what's this bringing it back together is what are we really trying to accomplish in this whole dance of experience and calling upon and connecting and fractals, and why? What's it all for? And so Ra says the purpose of incarnative experience or existence is evolution of mind, body, spirit. So growth, in a sense. In order to do this, it is not strictly necessary to have catalyst. Catalyst is experience that challenges us to choose, in a sense, that challenges us to move out of our comfort zone, to grow and progress or whatever, right? Catalyst can be getting a new job or getting fired from your job. I mean, almost anything is a catalyst if you think about that, causes you to make a choice to do something different. However, without catalyst, the desire to evolve and the faith in the process do not normally manifest, and thus evolution occurs not. So that's interesting. The divine oneness, the divine awareness realized that without things to stimulate it, it just sits there, right? And that's why this is the eternal process, because when it first became aware, and we'll go to, I'm actually preparing the next one after the veil one is going to be on how the beginning started, and the essence is the first one became aware. It started to become aware that it want to understand what is it as awareness, and so it developed a situation for catalyst that stimulated it to grow, and we're still in that process. Okay, so therefore catalyst is programmed, and the program is designed for the mind body spirit complex for its unique requirements. Now that's interesting. So the catalysts are not the same for all. There are some required classes, but they're also designed uniquely for you. So you could take this lesson say it's a biology class or a math class, and you can teach it in 100 different ways, right? You're learning the same skills, but there's 100 different ways to teach that skill in math. And so what happens with this is you get a specific catalyst that's designed to teach it to you in a way that's what your unique requirements desire. It's tailored for you, in other words. Thus, it is desirable that the mind-body-spirit complex be aware of and hearken to the voice of experiential catalyst, gleaning from it that which it incarnated to glean. So there is Ra's way of saying everything that happens to you, catalyst, is designed perfectly for you in the situation you're in right now. So if you see it that way, instead of seeing it as, I don't know, why is it always go wrong? Or why is God always screw me over like this? Or why does this shit happen to me all the time? Instead of seeing it that way, if you can see it this way, it's desirable for you to be aware of and hearken to the voice of its experiential catalyst. What's it trying to teach you? It might be an uncomfortable lesson, but it doesn't have to be. It's really more about how you respond to the lesson, right? You go into a math class hating math, you're going to hate the whole class. If you go into a math class and say, I think this guy or this girl is a good teacher, I'm going to dedicate myself to learning how to do this, because I see it as a skill that maybe I can use in my life. And so just that attitude change changes everything about the experience of the same class. I think that's what he's kind of saying here too. There is an energy in each of the centers that needs to be to keep the mind-body-spirit complex, which is the vehicle for experience, in correct confirmation and composition. So now he's going to talk about the energy centers, and there's a lot more we can do explaining on this. After that point, however, it's just keeping it in balance and composition, it is correct that the negative will use these three lowest centers for separation and control over others. So separation from and control over others, by sexual means, by personal assertions, and by actions of society. So that's how the negative people are locked into these lower three centers. Whereas Ra says, contrary-wise, the positive-oriented entities will be transmuting, in other words, changing strong red ray sexual energy into green ray energy, transfers and radiation, into green ray energy transfers and radiation in blue and indigo, and will be similarly transmuting selfhood and place in society into energy transfer situations in which the entity may merge with and serve others, and then finally radiate into others with expecting it without expecting any transfer in return. So all that's saying is that the selfhood and the sexual energy and the place in society are the keys to these bottom three ones. The negative use it in a negative way, as he's saying here. The positive transmute it through the heart chakra, the key chakra, to be in service to others in these ones. So these are the spiritual centers. These are the more worldly kind of centers. The Kundalini is seen as a coiled snake that coils around the bottom part of your spine. It's coiled up here. Now, what happens is there's an energy that's outside of your body that comes in through the bottom of your feet and through the bottom of your spine. It's energy that's constantly flowing. All right. It's the universal energy. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's also an energy that is your divine energy that comes in through your crown. And another place he says the crown is always on the head. This is already in you. This energy, this divine spark energy, this higher self soul energy, tries to call this snake up. And Ra says that the image of the coiled snake is a good metaphor, because it tries to wake the snake up from staying here and bring it up through the heart up into here, which is how we open the gate to intelligent infinity. So that's kind of what he's combining. The purpose of life is to grow in the mind, body, spirit, to evolve. In this life, this is the spiritual path of the seeker, is to draw that energy. That earth energy comes up through, pulls up that spiraling energy in here, Instead of leaving it down here where it can create some problems if it's not used right, it transmutes it through the heart chakra, through loving others, into the spiritual endowments and powers and capabilities that the ancients have been recorded of having, and many people have today. Is that questions about that?
Here's one from Lou. Do you want to speak to that comment in the chat, Lou?
No problem. We touched this subject already, and that was on the higher self and your spiritual growth previously. So I would say from that point of view that this will be the revised version of it, that 3.8, and will that, or will this include a more elaborate detail on the veil? That's one thing. Then the other thing that I hope will be then available at the end when completed.
Yeah, when we do the veil one, we'll be talking about this in a little more detail. Exactly.
Okay, good.
I'm
So
just
then,
mentioning it here because. Go
okay,
ahead.
great. So looking forward to the next part.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks, Lou. Ray?
Quick question. As you mentioned that awakening of the Kundalini has to go through heart up to the indigo light. So what about the people who turn negative or who use their awareness on the negative side?
Yeah, they don't really awaken the Kundalini. What they do is they use the energy down here in a manipulative way through expression, through the throat expression, but not so much through the divine gifts, although some of them do learn to connect with the magic of darkness. Okay. But it's motivated and driven still from being really hyperactive here. So they actually emphasize, and that's what he's saying here. They emphasize and magnify this energy for the manipulative means that they're talking about here. Sexual means, personal assertion, actions in your society. Later on, he will talk about people in the Law of One. He talks about people who crave or seek out power over others are very often driven by, usually it's this chakra point here, the solar plexus chakra, because they want to assert power over others, actions in your society. Now, they might be very gifted speakers, and we see a lot of that in politicians that are gifted speakers. That's not just the throat chakra. I mean, it's other talents, but that's a kind of a throat chakra quality, is the ability to articulate well and influence people. All right. But they basically do just magnify these ones.
Yeah, is this also the correlation between there are so many stories all over the world, like Pop Insta's sexual abuse, or this person involved, especially these gurus or all sort of such people who once have been very well known or very well speakers, and then they come up with the stories in like sort of sex, sort of exploitation, etc., etc.
Yeah. See, that to me indicates by their behaviors they're not truly open their heart chakra. They might be pretending, and in fact, the deceivers are very good at pretending to be good people. You have to watch what they do, not what they say, and that's very, very true today in the world politicians. And the one guy that comes to mind, and most people probably don't know him, but he's the governor of California. Very suave, very Obama-like in his, charisma, very good talker. But look what he's done to that state. He's ruined it. The guy is just horrifically doesn't care about the people really, but when he talks, oh, he melts you. You just think, oh, this guy's wonderful. He's not, but he can really, really, really put on paint the picture and play the game. And those people are very dangerous because they're very, very good at doing this. And one of the things that I want to talk about down the road, there's a whole section in the Law of One on how the Orion group manipulates the minds and hearts of men, how they teach their affiliates on earth, in other words, the mortals who basically align themselves with them, to use these three bottoms energies to totally manipulate and deceive people. And that one of the key ones is that they seek positions of power and they become very charismatically articulate in their deceptions, right? And the other thing is they don't feel any shame. When they're caught in it, they just move on to the next one. They don't even bother trying to get out. They have no shame. Their hearts are truly dark. Just really, really a shame. But what we want to talk about more, I think, is the positive path. And it's to take this energy, it's naturally there. You don't have to awaken the lower energy, because the energy is always there. And what you're dealing with in life, and you learn about all this stuff through, adolescence. Once your sexual energy is awakened, but sexual energy is not just that; it's safety and security. Your identity is the navel one. Is your separate identity and understanding who you are, and then how you influence society. So he's saying it here. Sexual means personal assertions, your identity, by actions in society. How you have power or allow people to have power over you. How you play with others. The serpent energy, this is already awakened. There can be blockages, and often are blockages in here through traumas and whatever things that need to be cleared up to enable you to open up your heart chakra. And that's part of the process that we went through, that happens in the Queen's Chamber in the pyramid, but also in the meditations we're doing, and then all sorts of things, is learning how to clean that out. A lot of the karmic blocks happen in these lower chakras that sort of allow the energy just to trickle into the heart. What we want to do is open the river and allow it to flow up. Let that snake uncoil and come up and activate the higher points. The point of where we want to get it to is the third eye. And that's when truly you open the gateway and connect to your higher self and all through the veil. And the veil becomes really quite transparent then. And many in the group, I believe, have already achieved that. So once we get to talking about that, we'll get into the depth of that. But I've gone off on a tangent again, haven't I? Sorry. Any other questions?
No, nothing pressing.
Okay. So let's see if I can move my... No, I've jammed it up. Sorry. For some reason. Oh, there we go. Whoop. Let's go back to that one. Okay. So the origins of all energy, and this is what we're talking about now. So we just kind of go through, because we just went through this. The origins of all energy is the action of free will upon love. That's a very interesting statement. All energy is the action of your choices, your will, your asserted will upon love. Will is the word, your will is the word that Ra uses instead of the religious word faith, which is an interesting thing to consider. The nature of all energy is light. So very, very deep in this just first little group here. The means of its ingress into the mind-body-spirit complex is twofold, and that's what we just talked about. First, there is the inner light, which is Polaris of the self, the guiding star. He's talking about the inner light that you inherit as your divine nature comes in through the north point, the guiding star. This is the birthright and the true nature of all entities. The energy dwells within. So this is your linkage to the divine part of you, the higher self part of you. The second point of ingress is the polar opposite to the North Star, shall we say, and may be seen, if you wish to use the physical body as an analogy to magnetic field, as coming through the feet from the earth and through the lower point of the spine. So that's what we just talked about. This point of ingress of the universal light energy is undifferentiated until it begins to filter process through the energy centers. What he means by that is it's just pure, undifferentiated white light until it starts to hit these energy centers. But what he's actually saying is we are a walking prison. We take the white light in and we transmute it into the 7 rays. That's what happens. And so if you pull it up through, it starts to change or differentiate the white light into your unique quality of vibratory color in each of the 7 rays, right? The light is undifferentiated until it begins its filtering process through the centers. The requirements of each center and the efficiency with which the individual has learned to tap into the inner light determine the nature and the use made by the entity of these instreamings. So, in other words, how well you've unblocked it, and the individual, your individual discipline and abilities will determine what you do with that energy. The energy ingress ends with indigo, so comes up to the 3rd eye. The violet ray at the top of your head is a thermometer or indicator of the whole. So it's not coming in and then going out the top. It comes in and then opens your pineal gland, your 3rd eye, and activates your abilities there. So the point is that it only a very little needs to be used to maintain these. So the higher you bring it up, the more you end up with being able to use it here with the spiritual gifts of second sight, etc. It has to, though, be enabled by the heart for the true gifts to come. And so it's interesting, there's a great connection between the green and the indigo ray centers. The violet ray is a thermometer indicator of the whole. In the fully activated entity, only a small portion of in-streaming light needs to tune the energy centers is used. That's what I just said. The great remainder being free to be channeled and attracted upwards. So there's the synopsis of what we were just talking about, of what happens when we awaken the Kundalini, of why that's so powerful. The heart truly is the key one. And later on in other places, it says that once you've activated the heart, these start to activate kind of in and of themselves. The heart is the grand opening or door to activating and opening the spiritual gifts here. Most people don't have blockages in the higher ones that much. The blockages tend to be in the lower ones, some around the heart. And he does talk about what blockages can occur, but mostly we end up blocked down here because we're just so busy about trying to keep our identity, be safe. You don't feel safe all the time, you tend to have a blockages down there. If you're always trying to establish your identity, you don't feel respected, or you don't feel like people recognize your individuality, or you don't trust your own individuality, then you have a blockage here. If you have problems in how you relate with people in society, if you are a bully, or if you let people bully you, or are you a victim, or you victimize others, those kind of things show a blockage here. Most people live their life in these lower 3. Most people, they don't get to here. They might have a touch and experience that they would call love. They haven't truly activated the heart to listen to it and tune in. And that's the key to turning into your higher self, is learning to listen to hear your heart rather than your head. We tend to want to be too heady in today's world. Being heart-centered is the key. The other interesting aspect of this is red ray is male, orange is female, yellow is male. So the bottom 3 is very masculine dominated. Heart is female, throat is male, 3rd eye is female. The top 3 are feminine dominated. Interesting. So we're moving from a masculine dominated mindset, which was the old 3rd density world, into a more feminine energy mindset, which is the 4th density heart chakra world. Questions about that?
Nothing as yet, but I do have a quick one. Just regarding the top of that, Rasi, the origin of all energy is the action of free will upon love, and the nature of all energy is light. You said something along the lines of free will is the same as faith. Can you explain a little bit further on that?
Yeah, a lot of times in the biblical teachings, especially of Christ, the writings of Paul, they talk about how important faith, with the faith of the grain of a mustard seed, you could move a mountain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people misunderstand that. What do they mean by that? And some people use the term faith to mean the belief system, right? My faith is Buddhism, or my faith is Christianity, or my faith is Judaism, whatever. That's one way of using that word, but that's not the way we're meaning it here. It's the power of your will. So when Jesus said, your faith has made you whole, he could have said, your will, the focus of your intentions, your openness and of mind, the ability to focus what it is that you truly and strongly believe and desire has made you whole. In that sense, I think that's where correlates to both.
It makes
And
sense.
the development of your will is part of what happens by learning how to focus your mind well, properly in meditation. You learn how to focus it and keep it in a focused state for an extended period of time.
Awesome. Thank you. Nothing in the chat.
Last slide is another is the example we've used many times, where Ras says very clearly that this density, the people of third density, has perhaps 100 times as intensive a program of catalyst or experience action from which to distill distortions or learn to lessen their distortions, distill, lessen distortions, and learn teachings than any other of the densities. This is the theme park of the whole octave. This is where higher beings come to have an exciting experience. And the reason for that, significantly, we'll find next time, is because this is the only density that's failed. But it creates a situation where the learnings and teachings are most confusing, and the mind body spirit complex, which is, shall we say, inundated by the ocean of experience. And so that's why all of the higher realms tend to focus on trying to serve those in this realm. This is the choice point, but this is also a very exciting level to live in that you don't have memory of who you are, you don't know you're connected, you can make all the mistakes, you can try all these different things, whereas when you were awake or are awake and know that you're actually part of the divine oneness, you most likely wouldn't have done any of those things. So hence the value of the veil, but causes this to become a very intense program of experience. So if you want to look at it the other way, in the other realms, they're much more mellow, much more peaceful. If you're thinking of it as a river, the other realms are the very slow meandering part of the river. Third density are the rapids, and the waterfall are the danger and the excitement, but intense part of the river, right? So the flow of time, that's what he's trying to say here. So that's why so much help is offered here, but the calling and the teaching of the Lord One is to awaken us enough that we learn how to access the river guides to get through the rapids of this experience. The river guides who've gone through it eons and eons of times before can help us get through it successfully and safely. And that's it. Okay. So let me stop sharing that. Looks, I just appreciate you guys' patience. It is a bit late, but we managed to get through it. It's about the time we started 2 hours ago, isn't it? So some of you are able to endure. Some of you had lives you had to go to work tomorrow. I'm sure. Appreciate your patience. Is there any final questions or comments before we let everybody go?
Sherry, go ahead.
Yes. Just one question, Scott. Well, not one part, probably will go on to others. If we're living parallel lives in different densities, where does the soul fit in? Is it only in third density and the rest and your parallel experiences are consciousness? Or is
No, I think the concept, as I understand it, is your soul is actually your higher self, and you own a piece of that lightens you up, that connects you. Just like it's the same as the higher self is a piece of the one true creator. The nature of the creator is its ability to endlessly and eternally and limitlessly fractal itself like a hologram does, where each little piece is an exact full copy of the whole. So you're not just a little piece that's broken off from your higher self. Like a holograph, if you cut a piece out of a holographic picture and look at it under a magnifying glass, it's the whole picture. It's not just the corner that you cut off. And that's the analogy of how it works with the fractal concept with the divine. So it enables itself to connect with you by giving you a full copy or piece of it that is all of it. All right. And so your soul is in you, but it's also linked to the higher self, which is the fullness, and the higher self is linked to you and the other you and the other you at all densities from third on out. So they all are a part of the whole.
So why do we have to try so hard in third density if we are fractionally being tested and experiencing different scenarios in different densities and higher densities?
Each density has different lessons. This is like saying you have to try hard in grade school, but you also have to try hard in high school, and you also have to try hard in university. Just different types of lessons and learning experiences built on each other. You have to try hard in the learning experience, or you have to put forth effort in the learning experience you're in to gain the value. Right here, they call it the polarity necessary to transfer into the next level. We'll talk a lot more about that, I think, in the next one in a month, where we'll talk about what it takes to break through the veil and to step through into the next density. And what Ra says, it's like climbing a staircase. And so you're on the third density step, trying to step up to the fourth density. But he says there's a kind of resistant barrier between them that requires significant effort to get through. And only those that put forth the effort can get through. And he even uses the analogy of the homework. He says those that haven't done their homework, even though they might be really nice people, haven't put forth the effort to penetrate that threshold. And so they need to go back and continue. And we learned that's what was the problem before the veil, is that people just didn't ever put forth the effort because they already knew they were connected to the eternal being, and they just sort of whatever. And so many were getting blocked at third density and not graduating for long periods of time. They decided to try an experiment and even call it an experiment. And that experiment was the veil, which gave us a great impetus to try harder, and actually caused the choice between service to self and service to others. It caused that polarity, and that polarity created a great deal of energized effort and work because they're contrary to each other. That creates a lot of growth that made this 100 times more intense of an experience, which motivated us to grow. So now third density is the shortest density compared to the millions of years you spend in the other ones. Third density is just a blink of the eye. 75,000 years if you can do it in the first 3 cycles. Some people come back for 2 or 3, but even then it's often much shorter than what you're going to live in 4th, 5th, and 6th density. And in second, most of us live quite a few million years in second density before they graduated into third. So the other densities time frame that they spend there learning those lessons is a lot longer because of the veil in third density. So the effort in the learning is just like saying to your kids in grade school, oh, don't worry about studying in grade school because you're going to learn all the good stuff in university. Well, they won't get to university if they haven't learned to read and write. So they have to put a bit of effort in at the beginning. At every level, you've got to apply yourself to really master the lessons there. Does that answer your question?
It's as if you've got a controller of your soul that redistributes it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the higher self, in a sense, they would
Your
say
higher
not
self.
control, but they oversee the process to enable that you don't go on to the next level until you're ready for it. Otherwise, it would be destructive to you, right? You're going to take a 7-year-old kid and put them in an advanced physics class in university,
Then
it's not going to
that's
be
not,
helpful.
then if they're controlling, that's not free choice.
No,
You're not.
it's probably not. The way to look at it is they're giving you the choice of how you will respond in the catalyst or stimuli that you are at a point will be meaningful and growing for you. If you don't allow a 6-year-old to go to an advanced physics class at university, you don't do that because first, they're not likely to understand anything. They're more likely to disrupt it or get confused. Much better for them to say, let me learn basic math and how to read and write at the level that I'm at in my maturity. And then when I end up growing enough to go to the advanced course, then certainly you have the choice to do that, but there's prerequisites before. So they're not going to throw you in the deep end and hope you can swim. They're going to teach you all the way through. And so in that way, it's limited out of just wisdom, right? Out of just exercising wisdom.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Interesting picture in the chat, Scott. I will share it if I can find it. Here we are there. From Jackie, she said soul extensions. She may want to explain what we're seeing here.
Well, it's a classic diagram where source throws off sparks of itself, which becomes the monad, what we call our higher self, our divine spark. And then we separate out into souls and soul extensions. Some people say we have 144 soul extensions. And I think that's a two-dimensional representation of what Scott was trying to say, is actually a fractal holographic thing, which is harder for the finite mind to grasp. Is that tally with what you're saying, Scott?
Yeah, it's a nice diagram. I mean, it simplifies it, but that's what we're trying to do, is simplify it down so that we can start to sort of think outside of the box of our limited perceptions. Yeah.
And a follow-up, try hard from Ray. It's hard to understand. Why a fool we have to learn is love.
It's interesting. There's only two things, according to Ra, that exist in actuality, and it is love and light. Love is the attractive force. Light is the creative seeking force. Combined together, all things are love and light. So love is much more nuanced and complex than just treating people nicely. That's where we start to experience like that, being attracted to somebody, loving a pet, or loving an experience. Those are sort of the introductions to attraction. What attracts one thing to another, it becomes much, much, much richer in the next dimension. So what we have to learn here is which way do we choose to seek and accept love? In service to ourselves, all about what I get out of this, or in service to others. And that gives us that polarization that puts us on the path where we go onto the experience of either learning how to be united in the service of others and enjoying giving more than just taking, whereas the negative path is all about what can I get, can I get more? I want more people working under me. I can get more from them. The more I get, the bigger I am, the more important I am. So they go on that more of an ego-driven, I am elitist, I am better than, I need or I need your adoration and service, because they've chosen and aligned themselves with a path of love of self. That path in love then turns to a path in seeking light, which is translated wisdom. Love is also equated with understanding. So we learn, Ra often says, you're not, Don often asks, help me understand this, and I would say something like, well, you're not in the octave of, in the density of understanding. You're in the density of choice, and you're supposed to be confused. You can gain knowledge, but it's supposed to be confusing here. And in fact, they equate the law of free will, they call it the law of confusion when it's in third density, because you make choices based upon what you want, not because you know exactly what's going to happen. It's confusing, and that tests you to see what's really driving me. In love, you have understanding, and you're seeking to manifest that. And what you're striving for in fourth density is what fifth density offers, which is light, which is equated with wisdom, right? So we go from understanding to wisdom to unity, balancing love, understanding, and wisdom, or love and light. So it's interesting how they equate the quality of love with understanding, the quality of light with wisdom. So it's much deeper and richer than our first initial sense of what does love mean here, or what does light mean here. You know, it's actually almost funny that we equate light to just luminosity, where it's much, much, much more meaningful and deeper than that in the eternal realm of things.
I think it's all like, as we have learned throughout, that light is basically awareness.
Yeah.
The more we get aware, the more it becomes simpler or easier. And it's better for us to make choices through the gate of, as you said, the density, that what is our motive to make choices. So, and everything comes with awareness, like the whole purpose of our sessions, classes, that we are getting more and more clarity and awareness.
Exactly.
And that's what
Well
in
said.
Vedic culture, throughout, we have so many mantras, right from our childhood, we have been learning, where it says, take me from darkness to the light. And which other way we have been like mentioned always, it is from the ignorance to the knowledge. So probably that's what is the making whole difference, and exactly what our sessions are all about, getting more and more awareness so that we can make choices with particular motive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Beautiful.
What a wonderful evening. So any final thoughts before we depart?
Thanks for your patience and your interest. To me, this is it's a joy to teach it, because to me it resonates with such abundant depth, and it just rings so purely true for today's age and the events of today's world. It's framing it without it creating a religiosity concept. It's trying to frame the reality from the point of view of how we speak and understand, specifically in the Western mind. So they've stripped all of the religiosity, theological stuff as much as they can out of what's really going on. But because they do that, it has very advanced and sometimes confusing concepts and language, and it has a lot of scientific stuff in there. There's an immense amount of knowledge that's yet untapped in the law of one. And the more people I listen to that are exploring it, the more insights and excitement I start to sense of people getting it. But it isn't easy to decipher. Although I would recommend it to any one of you to read through it yourself, because it's kind of an amazing experience to be reading through and you go, I really get a sense of something here, but I need to read that again, and I need to read that. It's something you have to really read in little bits and ponder it, and then reread it, and then it starts to open up to you, right? It'll start to you'll start to sort of get glimpses into it. And in that way, it's another way of connecting and channeling through and allowing the gifts of insight to come to you yourself from the texts. It's a wonderful experience, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to maybe help other people have that experience, because I think we're all seekers in our own way. And I think most of you, if not all, are wanderers in one way or another. And in one sense, the Law of One was written for wanderers, to try and awaken them to realize you are a powerful being that's come down with a mission. And it's the right time to know that you are, because it's at the end of this octave. It's the end of this It's at the end of this density transferring to the next one. So it's very important that the wanderers wake up to be able to bring that light and to sort of upbeat the human family into graduating. Because there are guys still say they're still quite concerned that the graduation will be less than desired. The harvest is less than what they want. They're trying to give time for the ripening fruit. But there's a lot of trouble. I think this year is going to be a very, very interesting year. There'll be a lot of polarization politically in the world. And so it's going to be a very powerful, interesting year to see, especially from a spiritual lens or a Ra law of one kind of lens. A lot going on. So use your discernment, keep your eyes open. It's going to be a wild ride this year, I guarantee it.